Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This, Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This is Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This is the Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great.
Hello and welcome
This
to a new episode of the Many Voices of Grit. With me, your host, Vernon Wright.
That's impact.
Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at The Right Leader. Hashtag That's Impact the Right Way as well. Be sure to follow the hashtag The Many Voices of Grit. And as I say often, many voices, many faces, all grit.
Many voices.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and say to you that today is a landmark episode. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but I do want to go ahead and let you know that it is a landmark episode for us here on the show, The Many Voices of Grit. Before I jump into what today's episode is about, I do want to go ahead and say to you to remember this. As always, for those colleagues, friends, family, and others that you know in the business, share this episode and pay it forward with those that you know and you care about. This episode very well could be the game changer for those individuals and for you as well in your profession. So share the episode and pay it forward. As well, for those of you that have followed the episodes, you know that all of the previous episodes are on DisruptED TV's YouTube channel. Be sure to go over there and catch up on those if you're a new follower, relatively new. All of those episodes are there on DisruptED's YouTube channel at a cost to you that is free. That is zero, right? So let's go ahead and let's jump into today's landmark episode. As you see, the title on the screen is Cool Grit Part 2. So you're probably wondering, if you haven't seen Cool Grit Part 1, well, you know, Mr. Wright, Vernon, what does this mean? Well, the person that we have the honor, privilege, and pleasure of having on the show today is Evan Robb. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I do want to go ahead and let you know that on this show, one of the things that we do and we're ardent about is always bringing to you viewers, guests that resonate with you and guests that you say really added value to your profession. And that brings us back to Evan. Evan's first episode, ladies and gentlemen, was the most highly and is the most highly watched in terms of views episode that I have ever done on this show. So for us to go ahead and wonder whether Evan resonated with viewers, I'm going to go ahead and say this. As we say in the education field, what does the data say? And the data says clearly that Evan did resonate with you. So it is my privilege, honor, and pleasure, as I have said before, to bring Evan to you again for Cool Grit Part 2. So with no further ado, Evan, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those folks that maybe didn't go ahead and see you on Part 1.
Vernon, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come back on your show one more time. You're just doing fantastic work, and all the work that DisruptED TV is wonderful, and a lot of great information shared to people who want to learn and grow as educators. Now, as for me, I am completing my 20th year as a building level principal, but I'm also an author and a speaker and someone who is extremely committed to public education and helping teachers and students grow. But really at the end of the day, I consider myself an educator who wants to make a positive impact on my building, my community, students, and of course the staff in my building. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Vernon.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're probably wondering, you say, Vernon, this is a landmark episode. It's the first time that you've had a guest on for the second time with the series and with the show, The Many Voices of Grit. What are you going to do? Are you just going to go ahead and ask them the same 3 questions a second time and see if they come up with something different? Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you know the spirit of this show and my perspectives and what I feel and how passionately I feel about delivering value to your professional lives and what you do, you know that we're not going to go ahead and do the same thing a second time. We're going to go ahead and do something a little different and bring value to you and your professions and your professional practices and what you do. So what that does is that brings to us a series of 3 new questions. Yes. So as always, if you want to go ahead and get a notepad, get something to write down with, prepare yourself and do that now. So let me go ahead and ask you, Evan, are you ready for 3 new questions?
I think I am 100% ready.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan says that he is ready. So with that being said, what a beautiful and perfect segue to go into question number 1. Are you ready, Evan?
Absolutely.
Evan says he's ready. Ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and share with you and Evan question number 1. Evan, one of the things that I want to do with question number 1 is really change the perspective. And with that being the case, this question simply is this. You were on the show, obviously, as a show guest, but you watched it as a viewer. You watched the episode. You may have even watched it multiple times. As someone from the perspective of a viewer that watched the show, what really resonated with you? What did you like as an individual watching the show, not just as a show guest?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed was the opportunity to write this letter to my former self from a long, long time ago and to give myself some advice about my path within education. And, as I watched the video and I reflected on that, a couple things that I said are really, really important to me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that there are 3 types of teachers that we experience as we move through life. And anyone who's watching this can reflect on these people that we did not like, possibly even teachers that we may have hated, teachers whom we forget about over time because time moves on and they didn't cause a big impact to us, or teachers who change our lives. And the message to my former self, and certainly a message that I would want to communicate to anyone who's watching this in education, is take on the challenge to be the person that creates a true impact to those children whom you work with and also to the adults that are around you. Another thing that resonates with me that I appreciate the opportunity to communicate is the importance of choosing positivity as we move through our professional careers and we move through our personal lives. Negativity is cancerous in education. It is a problem. It hurts kids and it hurts the culture within a school. And we all need to make a choice every day about what kind of person we want to be. I choose positivity, and I certainly encourage people to do that also. Another thing that resonates with me when I think back to things that I did when I was new to education, and Vernon, you might be able to relate to this too, is I engaged in practices that were not necessarily good, but I did them because everyone else around me did them, or they were simply traditions that existed within a school. And it's important to reflect on practices that we do now and ask ourselves, do they make sense? Are they good for kids, or are they simply something that's carried on that it may be time for it to go? You know, an example that comes to my mind is something like extra credit, and how extra credit is something that I absolutely took advantage of with kids and their families when I was a young teacher, but it gives a false impression of a student's understanding of material.
And I so affirm you, Evan, for bringing that up, right? Because there may be some folks in the profession. You are what we would say professionals who are in the early phase of your career, anywhere from this being your first year to be in the profession up to, we would say, usually about the 3 to 5 year mark. And as Evan has shared, really it's critical, it's essential, it's imperative that you look at the systems, the processes, the practices, everything that you do that is a part of this thing called teaching, right? And you question that, not from a critical lens, but you really examine that and you look at that in terms of asking yourself, is it good for kids? Does this make what we do better? Does it add value? And one of the things I want to say is, if you are a decision maker, a leader within your building or even at the district level, I think one of the things that we have to be reflective about is really creating these environments and cultures where we say, and we really allow our staff members at all levels to really feel free and to be empowered to really look at our systems and to not feel like they don't have a say, or maybe they haven't been in the business long enough to have a say. Everyone's voice is valuable, and that's what it takes for us to really examine the processes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know, the voice that comes from your reflection is very powerful also. You know, the other example I can give is, I was an English teacher when I was a young teacher in the profession. And I would engage in whole class novel instruction. So everyone in the class would read the exact same book. And it sounds good, and maybe it sounds better than a reading textbook, which was something that was in the division I'd worked in prior to going to whole class novel instructions. But it's based off of a presumption that all the kids can read at the exact same level. And they simply can't. So there's some kids that can breeze through the book and some kids who can't read the book at all. And that's something that I engaged in. I like to make sure I come clean with that, because that is not something that that I support or am a proponent of nowadays, because kids have different needs, and we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs within the classroom.
You know, I want to affirm you again, Evan, and I'm just going to go ahead and be very honest with you, viewers and followers of this channel and this show. That's one of the personal reasons I wanted to go ahead and have Evan on the show again. I am honored and privileged and absolutely grateful to every guest that has been on this show. I've said that multiple times throughout tweets, and I've said that on episodes before, and I'll say it again. I want to say particularly for Evan that I am appreciative of him and grateful to him, because he's authentic. He's just going to go ahead and tell you, hey, here's where I was in years past, here is where I am now. And one of the many, many reasons that's important is this is a leader telling you, here's where I was and here's how I evolved. I think what sometimes folks think is leaders just start day one in what they would call this perfect state. And that's not reality, folks. It's not reality at all. And if someone's telling you that that's the way leaders start out on day one in this perfect state, I challenge you to really go through some periods of introspection and reflection, and to really think about whether that's the most accurate sentiment that's been shared with you. And Evan's telling you, hey, this is where I was, this is where I am now. And as he's done that, I challenge you to do this. Think about any instances where you started out, whether it was last month, last week, last year, 5 years ago, and where you're at right now in your educational practices, you're in a different place. I challenge you to think about that as Evan is sharing and has shared about his evolving systems.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that. Part of leadership and just part of growing as a person is evolving. And I have gotten to a place in my life where I'm perfectly comfortable to share some of the mistakes that I made in the past and let people know that I continue to be a work in progress. One of the things that I think is important also for educators is to share with kids that, let me explain it like this. A lot of times when I talk with youngsters, they believe that because I'm a principal, that school was just magic for me, and I made high grades, and it was the easiest thing in the world, and it really couldn't be farther from the truth. School was frustrating for me and very, very challenging when I was growing up, and I'm one of those people that's probably more the motivator that I wanted to go into the profession of teaching and become an administrator, not because it was all roses, but because it was really challenging. And sharing that with kids is a good thing to do. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable when people do that, but kids appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, question number 2, if you could just talk to us very briefly, Evan, about after having watched the video and colleagues, friends, family, and others having watched the video, what did they share with you resonated most deeply with them?
Thanks for the question, Vernon. One of the things that I was pleased to hear when I would speak with people about the episode was the story I told about my grandfather. My grandfather was a self-made man and came to America all by himself when he was 18 years old, a long, long time ago, almost 100 years ago. And through grit, determination, and hard work, he became very, very successful. And I think one of the things that resonates with me when I think about my grandfather is a lot of us sometimes only associate with people who have hit the pinnacle. The athlete who's in the NBA, or the very successful executive, or the very successful educator. But sometimes we forget all the hard work that goes in order to get to that place. And that's important, and certainly an important message that resonates through your show, which is this whole topic of grit and being able to find determination and work hard to achieve your goals.
Okay, so Letters from the Future, Part 2. Letters from the Future, Part 2. So Evan, if you're able to jump in a time machine, go back in time, and give a letter to your younger self, what wisdom and guidance would you give your younger self about what graduate, doctoral, or other degree programs to pursue, and or professional development or any other training that you feel would have propelled you in your future self?
That is a great question. We had a really good time talking about that offline, and I want to share a lot of that with the viewers right now. First of all, it is absolutely important to be a learner. And nowadays, the ability to learn on your own is much greater than it was 20 or 25 years ago because of social media and the internet and the ability to be able to access information. Professional development, absolutely critical to developing as an educator, but it's not good just to wait around for professional development opportunities when you have opportunities to learn on your own at any given time. Now, graduate programs, are certainly an interesting topic. There's certain avenues that you need to take in education. For example, if you want to become an administrator, you have to get a certain amount of credentials through a graduate degree in order to even have an interview and be able to be in the position. But what I would say, and I think about this a lot and I get asked about it a lot, is you need to do some personal reflection on why you actually want to go into the program. And I think nowadays, especially with online programs, the ability to learn and really have the program be impactful for you depends to a high degree on your self-motivation. And if you're really motivated and you're doing something that you're passionate about, good, go for it. That could be a good pathway. But never presume that just because you have the degree, whether it's the master's degree or a doctoral degree, that alone gives you permission to lead. And I think that's sometimes a mistake that people can make.
Let me say this, ladies and gentlemen, for the viewers and followers again that are watching this episode. And even if you're not a follower of this channel, and if you're not, make sure you subscribe and follow us here on Twitter. And make sure you follow DisruptED TV as well here on Twitter and on YouTube. I say this to you. If you're in a position where you've been in the business a while, you have a proven track record, and you have what I would call additional capacity beyond what you need to fulfill your daily roles at a high level, if you have that additional excess capacity, I challenge you to mentor someone professionally, because leaders mentor. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. There it is. Cool grit Part 2 with the guest here today, Evan Robb. We're so thankful for Evan being on the show today and sharing his time with us. Ladies and gentlemen, as we always say here on the show, make sure that you share the episode and pay it forward and make a difference in the lives of those that you are colleagues, friends, and family with, and those that you love. This episode may for them be the game changer in their careers. So, ladies and gentlemen, lastly, as we say often, feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. That's impact the right way. See you next time.
Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This is Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This is the Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. Many voices, many faces, all great. This is the Many Voices of Great. That's impact the right way. Feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow